Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's PMI Friday webinar, Greenbelt Tools That Pack a Punch, with Sean Buckland. He's in fighting form today, I need to not remind you. My name is Susanna. If you haven't met me before, I'm Susanna Clark. I'm one of the managing partners at PMI, and I'm delighted to be facilitating today's session. So that includes running the Q&A desk, and we're going to be using that throughout today. And you can find the Q&A and the chat buttons on your Zoom control panel. Please do keep your questions coming. We love it to be as interactive as possible. So any comments you have, any observations, please share them and I will share them with Sean. Today's webinar is being recorded and we will send you a link via email early next week to the full recording of both the audio and the presentation you're going to see today. And as usual, we're also broadcasting live on Facebook and on LinkedIn. So to those of you who are joining us on those live streams, welcome. If in future you want to participate in any of our polls, receive the recording via email, then do register for the webinar at pmi.co.uk/webinars. We will also send all registered participants a short voice of the customer survey. We're always really interested in your feedback, anything that we can do better, any suggestions for future topics, please do let us know. And finally, from me, before we get underway, just a reminder, we've been running these webinars every week now for a year. We're coming up, actually, our first birthday is tomorrow. So the point of them was to support our clients and our fellow industry practitioners all through this difficult time that we've all been sharing. And we're very conscious that some people are currently not in work. So we do offer our support. Please do send your CV or profile into us if you're not in work and you're looking for new work. And we are offering a free service to review it for you and give you any recommendations for improvement or opportunities to enhance it. So that's all from me for now. And thank you everyone for your continued support. I'd now like to hand over to Sean.
Thank you very much, Suze. And welcome back to everybody who's been with us before, and a big hello to the new people who this is the first time you're with us. It's great to have you with us. Thank you for joining. So we've got a bit of a boxing sport theme today to go with our Greenbelt Tools That Pack a Punch. So in the ring today, we have got getting to know your opponent, developing your attack strategy, defending against the counterattack, exploiting the weak spot, and of course, finally landing that winning blow. So let's see what this means in practice. Well, we want to kick off with an opportunity for you to write to us, just a brief couple of words or a short sentence. And what we're interested in is think about a time where you've been working in an improvement project and for some reason or another, it's got stuck and you didn't know what to do. And what we're interested in is, what did you do? What was the tool or the technique that you applied to turn things around and get back on track? So I'll just give you 30 seconds to think about that and then just type into the chat, and it'd be very interesting to hear from you what sorts of things you've done to turn projects around that have got stuck.
So yes, so just if you open up the chat window, start typing and popping in your thoughts about that. That would be great. Don't be afraid to share. Sean, any stories of your own?
Wow. Yes. I mean, I think it's fair to say that every project I get stuck at some point. And
Okay.
and in some ways, I've over time I've learned to look forward to that point, because whilst it's basically flat out terrifying, that's the point where I really understand I really don't understand. And then from there on in, because when my brain has taken on just the sheer size and complexity of the problems we're trying to fix, that's when I have that panic moment. And then I just trust the process. And I just settle down, I trust the process, and it always sees me through.
Yes.
So
yes. There's a lot to be said for trusting the process.
It's saved me more than once.
So we've got some feedback in the chat. So there's something about process management, something around field force diagrams.
Oh, right. Yes, interesting.
Identifying what driving and restricting forces are in play. That's
nice.
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've got Pareto.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at volume
Mm-hmm.
by duration, so to identify where most time is spent rather than just purely looking at volume or purely looking at duration.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I've got a story here about a major incident which happened in a plant due to the flow of liquid due to pressure in drums.
Mm-hmm.
And how they resolved that was to work with 5 whys and a fishbone diagram.
Okay.
And then looking for
more.
I've got one more. I think this is interesting because I think this is a different area slightly than just core traditional tools. So something about looking for support from leadership, CEO, you know, and being able to explain the current challenge and the current situation.
Yes. Yeah.
So thank you for those very much. Sean, over to you.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for those examples. And I completely relate to every single one of those. And there's always an element of the psychology side of the process, and that moment in time where you're pulling the team together and having those open discussions and being honest about where you are and not hiding from those facts, and then also finding an appropriate tool to help you structure your thinking to get out of that. Some of those we will obviously refer to today, but that very first one that you mentioned, the force field analysis, again, whilst I'm not covering that today, if you're not familiar with it, do look it up. It's an extremely powerful and useful tool. And certainly is a great input to those conversations when you're saying, right, guys and girls, we need to fix this. Let's see what we're going to do. So thank you for that. It sounds absolutely brilliant. So just to be clear with you today, I'm expecting many of you, if not all of you, to have used most of the tools I mentioned today. I'm not going to try and teach you anything new, but maybe I'm going to try and give you some insights into the way the tools can help you get that Greenbelt project to land that stronger punch, that knockout blow. So opening round, and the first we've called the opening round, getting to know your opponent. And there's a tool here that you won't find in any Greenbelt manual, but we all recognize the importance of here, and it's called the Mark 1 eyeball. So just this simple thing that we have, which is not simple at all. It's an incredibly complicated piece of engineering. And the use of the eyeball, in other words, we see languages like go see in particularly in lean literature. The Gemba walk is a common thing. In fact, Jim Womack wrote a whole book called that, I think. The eye for improvement, and a phrase that I use an awful lot, show me. So what I'm saying here is, before I even try and get involved in a Greenbelt project, I want to see with my own 2 eyes, what are we facing? Because very often what's happening in the setup is the business doesn't always have the best understanding of what the problem is, because it's reacting to some kind of symptom. So what I'm always interested to do is go and see for myself, not take anybody's word for something. And a very quick example of this was I had a senior manager of an engineering repairs team, and so they're a service business, and they're providing engineering support to various different places, and they were constantly running short of parts and from the supplies depot. And so the service that was supporting them was holding them up constantly. And I said, right, let's go and see what it's like in the supplies depot. And he goes, I've worked with these people for 20 years. There's no way I'm going to get anything new information. But what we did is we trained him up how to look with an eye for improvement, an eye for understanding. And 2 hours later, he came back and he said, right, I now know more about the supplies service than I have in just those last 2 hours than the previous 20 years put together. So that using the Mark 1 eyeball to assess what's going on, go see the problem for yourself, go and find out what's happening. If you haven't done that, then everything else after that is at risk. So that's my number 1 point for you. Okay. So we've gone and had a look-see. We've put a team together, and we now want to develop our attack strategy. How are we going to beat this problem and knock it out? So I'm going to talk to you. I mentioned this last week for any of you who were here last week, the Cybot tool, and I want to come back to it in a bit more detail today. And the Cybot tool is an incredibly powerful tool. However, I must admit, I did not understand it. It took me 5 years after learning and becoming a green belt myself before I properly appreciated and understood the importance of this tool. So I'm just going to sum up some of the key values within it, and then I will explain in more detail what it is in case anybody's not familiar. So the first thing is the Cybot tool helps establish the scope of the project in operational and process terms. It helps you because it helps you define what is value adding before you get lost in the detail, which can often save you a lot of confusion and time. In fact, one project, we never even got beyond the Cybot. We were able to solve most of the problems just because of the power of the Cybot itself. The next thing is, particularly where you've got a complex problem that's stretching up and down maybe quite a large amount or even an entire value stream, it can help you get the agreement as to where the priority focus for improvement is. And once you're actually underway, it can help you keep focused, because as you get lost in the detail, it's very easy to get distracted by what you can and can't do. Whereas this tool will help you stay focused on why you're doing it in the first place. And it's a place to come back to if ever you get stuck and lost. And the nice thing is it can work at very many levels. So you might have one that sits at the whole value stream level, and then you might have a Kaizen blast in an area where you build another one specifically scoped in on that area, and potentially even a very detailed one for one particular team maybe. So it can cascade, which is very useful. Quick warning point, however, and this is again from my own experience, is I have been guilty of not doing it or doing it very quickly, just filling it in, and neither of those achieve the purpose of the tool. So what is it? Now again, we always recommend keeping this to a single page, maybe A3 if you've got a lot of information, A4 if it's just a small local information piece, but try and keep it all onto one page. And let me take you round it as a template. So up front, what process am I working on? What verb noun, what bit of value creating, what's the process that I'm looking to work on? If I'm not clear about which process I'm working on, I'm certainly not ready to run a process improvement project. Next thing, what inputs does this process depend upon and who's actually supplying them? That's a really useful thing to understand, surely. And then what value does the process create? And for whom does it create it? And in what form does it create it? And who is accountable for the quality of that? Those top three things, without understanding those, we can't even establish who the right team is, let alone what we're going to try and do about it. And so once we've established the team around this, we've got that, we can start working on the team, we can start doing some voice to the customer work. How does the customer define the output quality? What's the definition of right? What's the definition of right amount? What's the definition of on time? And of course, we can use our Mark 1 eyeballs again with the team, go back, go see some more, and identify what are the current top priority issues. Is it scrap rates? Is it call abandonments? Is it work not being delivered on time? Is it an 18-month lead time to get that handrail fitted in your grandmother's flat? All of these kind of different things. What are the result concerns from the customer's point of view? Because the most important thing to fix usually is that. And there are exceptions, but usually that's the place to start. Then what we're doing is we're now looking at the process in a very, very high level way. What are the 4 to 6 value adding steps within the process, within that bit of it? And it may be that it's useful to include some of the necessary non-value add steps like collect stores from warehouse or something like that. But the crucial thing here is we need to, if we can agree as a team, what are the main value adding steps, then as a matter of fact, we've already got a very clear scope for where we're trying to make our improvements happen. Then we can drill into some detail, and you might find it takes a little while before you're ready to do this, but again, always working with the team. For each of those main value adding steps or the necessary non-value adding steps, what are the measures that you're currently using? Not all of the measures. What are the measures that you've got that link to the output? So maybe their defect rates, maybe their cycle time information, whatever it might be. But maybe you have no measures at all, and that is, unsurprisingly perhaps now to me, but it's quite common that we don't have clear measures between the process and the output at step-by-step level. But if you do have the data, or even if it's just in qualitative form from conversations, what's the current performance? What we could do then is work out, using our voice of the customer, what would be the best definition of perfect at each stage in measurable terms. So instantaneous production, for example, the cycle time of 0, that may be practically impossible, but at least we understand what perfect would look like. Absolutely, every single person arrived on time for their appointment in the case of a delivery service or a maintenance service or something like that. And then what are the sources of variation and how do they affecting the process? So again, using our Mark 1 eyeball plus any data analysis we've done, we can go and find out at each step what the issues are. And so before we even start our project, on one page, we've got everything we need to know to be able to say, here's our results, concerns, and here's where we're most likely to get the benefit. So we can focus in very quickly with the team on what we want to investigate in more detail before we've even drawn a single process map. So fantastically powerful. Okay, so please do get the hang of the Cybot, practice it, make it your friend, and there it is. So we've got our project underway. We really know what.
Sorry, Sean, I was just going to say, and also please do keep your questions coming. So any questions you want of clarification on any of the tools like the Cybot that Sean's going through, please do put them in the chat, put them in the Q&A. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Suze. So now here's the situation. We've got our project underway. We've got a team. We're excited. We know there's some really good stuff to go after. We're optimistic that we can really make an improvement in the value for the customer, improve the business performance, make it easier and safer for the workforce, more enjoyable to be on the phones all day, whatever type of service or business you're operating within. But then the system starts fighting back. It's spent years getting to where it is. So maybe you're starting to get pushed. Oh, haven't you finished that? I need my staff back. I need my team members back. Or well, we tried all this kind of stuff before and it didn't work last time. And the system starts trying to resist and fight back. So what we want to do is give you an idea about some tools that hopefully you're already familiar with, but recognize that they are your armor. They're part of how you defend yourself. And I'm notwithstanding all the crucially important stuff around stakeholder management and looking after and keeping closely connected with your team and your sponsors. These are all crucially important things. We talked a lot about that last week. But I want to talk about the tools of the run chart and the SPC chart and the histogram. Now, I'm not going to try and teach how to do those, and actually we've got some webinar material available on the site about SPC chart in particular. So all good stuff to go and look into if you're not familiar with them. But for the moment, I want to talk about the power and the use of the tools to help you stay safe through the project. So we've got a quick poll for you here, and the question is this. Where do you rank statistical process control charts, or maybe, for example, like the IMR chart, in importance in your experience? From I don't really use them, they're useful, I use them fairly frequently, but other things I use more, top 3 to 5, or actually this is the one I'd keep.
And Sean, I've launched that polling now, so that should be on the screen. Everybody, you should be able to see both the question in the poll and also the options for the different answers that you can choose.
Lovely. The answers coming in. This is good.
Yes, answers are coming in. That's great. So I'm just going to leave this open for a few more seconds. And those of you who are joining us on LinkedIn or on Facebook, please do pop your answers in the chat. Happy to respond and see what you've got to say as well. Okay, so last couple of seconds and I shall end the polling. And then I'll share that so that everyone can see.
Wow. Now that's what you call a close race, isn't it?
It is indeed.
And in fact, that last one came in, the winning score came in at the last second, just as you were closing the polling. So, wow, what
Is
an
that what you
amazing thing.
expected?
No, no, I don't, to be fair, I was slightly more optimistic than this. Let me give you my answer. Assuming I've still got my eyes, because I'd started with Mark 1 eyeball, so I'm cheating here. I'm going to put that one to the side. This is the tool I would have above all others, for me personally.
Okay.
And because it's the only one that allows me to see what's actually going on over time. And if I'm trying to make change, change is all about performance over time. Is the demand on my service or on the factory going up or down or staying the same? Is the amount of capacity it takes to deliver the service or make the product going up, going down, or staying the same? Is the quality of what we're doing going up, going down, staying the same? The control chart is the tool that allows me to answer all of those questions. Everything else I can do with the Mark 1 eyeball and a good team around me. Yeah, but this is so it's actually the lowest scoring. So there we go.
Just to say, you know, Sean mentioned we've got previous webinars, and also we have a YouTube channel where we've also got some videos on control charts. So there's lots of information on control charts out there that we have. Please do get in touch. If you can't find what you need, do get in touch with us and be delighted to help. Thanks very much, everybody.
It's incredible what you can do with these things if you get the hang of them. So anyway, let's move on. But hopefully this next section will encourage you to do some more charting. Okay, so let's see what happens. So defensive tactics. Here you go. Quote from Ackoff and Addison. Russell Ackoff wrote this thing called Management F Laws, and this is number 19. The only thing more difficult than starting something new in an organization is stopping something old. And that's because of the inertia in the system that keeps going what's going on. So there are 4 key things the Greenbelt must be able to do, all of which are actually difficult. And the charts that we're about to show you are what will allow you to be able to do these difficult things. The first one may seem strange: to prove what everybody knows. Everybody knows there's a whole pile of additional calls come into the contact center on Monday morning at 8:30. Everybody knows that, you know, the B shift is the one who's always have the most problems on quality. Everybody knows. Anytime you've got this thing everybody knows, you need to be able to prove it right or prove it wrong. If they're right, you need to be able to shape and size it. And if they're wrong, and limit it to where does that truth stop? And if they're wrong, you better have some really good data. So I was working with a bank one time, there was a big crisis going on, and they thought it was temporary because everybody knew the problem that was driving this massive calls into the bank was down to this one letter that they'd sent out, and they knew it would die away. Because I'd used the control chart approach, I knew they were wrong by exactly 3 days. And as a result of that, we could look into what happened 3 days later and found out that there was a change in government policy that they had not picked up on. And in fact, the demand of calls was only going to go up and up and up. And they were already behind the curve. They need to literally treble the size of their contact center. And they would have left that for several more weeks if they had not understood what was actually happening. Disprove anything incorrect that a powerful stakeholder thinks is true. Very often senior managers are absolutely convinced that things are working in a certain way, and that's not always the case. And the control chart and the run charts that we're talking about will help you to demonstrate what's really going on. And obviously you don't have necessarily the positional authority to be able to just tell them they're wrong, nor is that actually a helpful conversation. Prove that an unwanted change really happened. Sometimes when we put in changes and things get worse, we don't like to acknowledge it, and those changes then don't get removed, they get left in the system. You know, that extra check to try and deal with the fact there was a quality issue. So, well, we're going to put in an additional piece of inspection. All that did was killed our lead times even further and drove up demand and failure demand on the system. So we need to be able to demonstrate that if a change has happened, it's not worked, we need to be able to do that, prove it. And likewise, sometimes there's things that we want to happen and they didn't actually make a difference. Suze, I don't know how, have you happy to share the story you were telling me about yesterday? Are you okay to jump in on this one?
Yes, I was shared with Sean yesterday that I had a situation where we had a control chart. Up was good, and I was convinced that changes we were making were really making things better. But the data wasn't showing that. So the data in the control chart saying that everything was normal, that there had been no significant change. So I was really working on, well, I might manipulate this. I might exclude some data, because if I exclude that, that might give me the signal. And so I consulted with Dennis, one of our colleagues, and he said, before we do that, let's try looking at some other ways of displaying the data, see if there's a causal relationship here. And everywhere we put this, no, there was no causal, relationship with any of the changes we've made. We're not making it better. And that was that was a bitter pill to swallow, because I really thought we were making a difference, but it made me go back and think again, and to think more creatively and to do more. That was the point, really, I think.
Thank you, Suze. That's absolutely brilliant. And I've been there myself, Suze. And this is it. Protect yourself against yourself. Because we all have our pet theories. We can't help it. And so there we go. So if you're not familiar with control charting, please do look into it. But if you're not, what I want to do is start you with a simple thing. Before you've even got into control charting, just start with run chart. They're simple to do. You can just pen and paper them in real time, or little Excel dots, whatever. They're very simple to read. There's no confusion between, oh, is that specification limit? What's the control limit? What type of variation? We don't have any of that detail on them, and therefore we don't need any stats. We can just simply see how the process is performing over time. And there's a really useful feature about the run chart that's actually surprisingly a little bit harder to do on the control chart. And that is this concept of the highest or the lowest repeatable value. So in this case, down is good, because I've got a picture here of number of errors. And what we've seen is the process in this case, you could argue a slightly different number. It's a little bit of gut feel involved, but here we could see 3 times we were able to get as low as 15 errors. Now, why is that useful information? Well, when we're looking at what number we can repeatably get that is in the direction that we want. In other words, if up is good, what's the highest repeatable value? If down is good, what's the lowest repeatable value? We want to know what is that number, because that tells you that when everything, all of the wind is blowing the right direction, all the currents are going in your favor, that's the best your process is consistently able to achieve. And sometimes that can give you a really good clue into what sort of project you're looking to run, even before you've done a single statistic. Are we looking at a step change? Because even in the best conditions, we're not good enough. Or we're looking at relatively smaller change, as in, you know what, under best conditions, it works fine. We've just got to try and get rid of some of that nasty variation that's messing it up and the rest of the time. So that can give you a hint about whether you're looking at maybe over a Kaizen event or the Greenbelt type approach. So very, very simple. Just get your ruler, run it up and down until you find that sweet spot where you've got that repeatable value that's on the side of better. And that'll give you a really good indication about what that process can do when it runs at its typical best. However, be careful of the run chart. Still learn how to do SPC if you're not familiar with it, because the problem with run charts is they're very prone to tampering. And by that, I mean, we react in the wrong way to the variation on the chart. And assignable cause versus common cause, if you don't know about that, please don't watch the other videos. But it's essential that you react to variation in the correct way. So before you take any actions from a run chart, do convert it into an SPC chart, just to make sure you know exactly what sort of variation you're dealing with. Then support this with the histogram. The histogram, again, they're easily understood. Everybody's seen a million of them in their lives already, probably. But it's a very powerful tool because it gives you an idea of where the outcomes of a process are. So in this picking error example, somewhere between 18 and 24 is a very typical outcome for this process. It's relatively normally distributed, by which I mean, if I just draw the pen, we've got a nice sort of hill shape there. So yeah, okay, so the process is probably behaving fairly predictably. And so we can actually use that as basis to understand what's the process likely to deliver for us. So anything between 15 and 31 errors is quite a normal, is what we would expect going forward as well. There's some other stuff you can do with them. So if you ran your histogram and you got this result, for example, I'm not sure why it's just suddenly shocked off to the side there. Ignore that bit. But over here, we've got a big lump, and then over to the right of it, a smaller lump, and maybe even a smaller lump again. And what that's doing is telling you your data set has got more than one process in it. Yep. Process 1, process 2, process 3. So separate out the data and find out what's going on. That's a really useful thing. Another thing that can happen is this. You can see a process that bonk. And you can just see that that's not how nature works. So it tells you there is some hard barrier going on here. And sometimes it's a physical barrier. So if I just draw it the other way around, total time for the plumber to arrive, you know, he can't or she can't come in less than 0 seconds. So you're unlikely to get anything less than 0 unless you've got an error in your data. But sometimes situations like this can occur if there's some distorting behavior going on. Maybe some target has been implemented, and in fact, the system is being distorted and people are cheating. So hospital admissions to A&E was very common on this one, where, oh, we're about to miss the waiting time target, so please walk out and then come back in and re-register, because then we'll say that you abandoned and that we'll start the clock again for you. But don't worry, you won't lose your place in the queue. That kind of distorting behavior. And you won't spot that so much on the run chart or the control chart. The histogram will help you to see it. So really, really powerful. Use the two together. Switch the pen off. So the main problem with the histogram is you do need quite a bit of data, 50, maybe even 100 points for them to become stable. So, so do use the two together. This one I really, really like, this picture that was shared with us internally recently. This is how to explain the normal distribution. You can actually see the histogram based on the damage to the paintwork, and that gives you a really good idea about the range of weights that the people in this particular gym, back to our boxing theme again, that's a really good example of a histogram in the real world. I love that. Okay, so always be charting. So whether you use run charts or learn how to use control charts, there's 3 different places you should always be using them. Setting up your baseline data before you run your project, in the test and study phase while you're testing out your ideas, and then once the process, your project's finished and you've handed back to the managers and the process managers, hopefully, then you've got it in the operating phase. And you're doing a slightly different thing at each phase. In the learning phase, we're understanding how the process is currently behaving. So try and use some data that really is up to date. In the test and study phase, we're looking to see if there's a change in the process. And then in the operating phase, we're looking to see if the system is becoming unstable again. So is something happening outside that we should react to, and obviously put in place countermeasures if we do. So it's always be charting, A, B, C. Right, so how do we exploit the weak spot? So we've got one of my favorite quotes from Deming, lack of knowledge, that's the problem. Yeah. So ultimately what we're looking for is to always make sure we've got a decent understanding of what's going on. And in the discussion points, thank you for your comments earlier, this is how you get yourself out of trouble. Seek better knowledge of the system using cause and effect attached to 5 whys, Pareto analysis, which was also mentioned, and scatter plots and regression, sometimes appropriate as well. So the cause and effect diagram, hopefully everybody's familiar with this, or the Ishikawa or the fishbone. What it's really good at doing is identifying the direct causes. It's not a root cause tool as such. It might be, but that would just be lucky. But it's ultimately very good at getting lots of different symptoms out. What are the different potential things that could be causing it? And then once you've got that, it also becomes a checklist, because once you think you found your root causes, you can go through everything on your chart to say, if we dealt with all of the root causes we found, 4, 5, 6, 13 in one particularly complex project case that I worked on, that was to do with social care. Once we've got all of the root causes identified, if we fix them, would all of these problems go away? And if you find there's still 1 or 2 sitting there that you go, you know what, then there's probably a bit more root cause work still to do. And of course, what the cause and effect does is it helps you to identify what you should investigate further. And that's, whether it's 5 whys or some other methodology. So this is actually harder to do than it looks. Make sure that you're following all the principles for effective idea generation, brainstorming, using silent methods, going back, always pushing harder. You really want to get to 40, 50 items on here. Just to really be sure that you are really pushing your brains as far as possible. Also, don't be frightened of generating new fish bones. It's not just the standard 5. I've worked with much more advanced and complex versions of this, if that's what's needed for your situation. Once we've done our once we've done our cause and effect, our direct causes, we will have some theories. And one of the ways we can test those theories is maybe we have to go and get a bit more data, but we could start putting things onto the Pareto chart. And what we're looking for is where's going to be our best endeavor. So in this example here, we've got root causes in variation delivery time, and we've got some categorical data, and the number 1 issue is standing out really loud and clear. I couldn't read the address on the delivery form. Well, there we go. So let's fix that problem first. Understanding motorbike breakdown on the delivery vehicle. Yeah, sure, that happens. It does happen, but it's not where we're going to get the best return. Solving the breakdown issue. We should still solve it in due course, but let's deal with the order form address issue first. And therefore, you could slice and dice your data in many different ways if you've got the right kind of tagging data. But if you don't have that tagging data, you might find, as a result of the cause and effect work you've done, that you need to go and collect and sample some more information. But don't be frightened of doing that, because an effectively done Pareto will make sure you're focusing on a smaller, more clear problem that's going to have the best effect. And then where the data is appropriate, you do need, this is a slightly different type of data set here, but if it's appropriate, is there a causal effect between A and B? And if we plot the scatter plot or regressions, if you're familiar with that methodology, then we can look to see if there's a direct correlation. Distance traveled with time to deliver. Yeah. So these obviously intuitively they make some sense. We've plotted the dots, and yes, there is a correlation. But there's distance between the line and the dots, so it's not the whole story. There are other sources of variation in play as well. So very, very powerful. But be very careful. Correlation is not the same as causation. So once we've established there is a correlation, use it predictively. If we travel 5 kilometers, then we would estimate it would be an 11-minute journey, plus or minus. Okay, and that, use it predictively. Don't just assume that there's a correlation, that it is definitely a causative one. Okay. So wrapping things up, we want to move on to the final tool. We want to land the winning blow here. We've survived through our project. We've really found out what we're going to focus on. We've come up with some really creative solutions. We've selected and we've control charted. We've demonstrated they absolutely are the right things to do in terms of our test environment. And now we want to roll out and put this back into the real world. It's time to act on the system and adopt our new solutions. Now, what I want to share with you is something you won't necessarily find in the Greenbelt manuals. This is something that goes back to my earlier career when I used to work as an organizational psychologist and specifically working on culture change. And I want to introduce you to a very powerful tool I've never let go of ever since those days. And it's this. So if we're going to win, we want to create a lasting improvement. It's not just a temporary fix. It's something that's better, at least until we can improve it still further. But the first thing to recommend is recognize is that every single person in an environment, in a system that you are changing, has to go through that change journey on their own. You know, and you can help them with it, but it's up to them to go through that change journey. And if that person successfully travels that journey, then they will adopt the changes and they will stick with doing those until something even better will come along. They will accept it as their new habit. But if they don't successfully make this journey, then the inertia of their existing habits and their existing status quo will mean they fall back into old habits, because the new is trying to overwrite the old, and that's really hard. If any of you tried to change a habit, maybe a New Year's resolution, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about here. So this is how to help people go through this. It's not just about training and handing over standardized documentation. Those two things are very important, but that's not what it's about. So I want to introduce you to this guy, Peter Scott Morgan, most amazing guy. Started off in robotics and then moved into the world of culture change, and is a phenomenal person. And he found that, well, he did some analysis on what was called resistance to change, and he wanted to understand what were the resistors of change. And he realized that these were the questions that people were asking. I'm not resisting the change, I just don't know why we need to change. So we've got to be clear with people about why the change is even worthwhile in the first place. Back to my Cybot diagram. Share that Cybot diagram with everybody, not just the project team. Make everybody aware and clear about the fact we're letting the customer down. We're not delivering enough on time, or that we're simply unable to afford to carry on working the way we are if it's issues with the voice of the business. But making sure everybody is clear and accepting of the fact there is a need to change before you try and sell them on this change. It's got to be done in this sequence, or else people don't have a rationale for understanding this change. But of course, once they've said, yes, I accept there is a need to change, then we need to be able to help people to understand that this change is the better one. Now, if you've been following your Greenbelt process, you'll understand you'll have done a lot of testing and plan, do, study, act throughout the process. You've got your control charts, etc., etc. But you'll also have been collecting qualitative data about how it feels working the new way, etc. And so when you talk people through, you want to be able to share with them, look, we tried this, we tried this, we tried this, and this was the one that gave us the best result. This is the one that's the least effort for you. This is the one that's safest for everybody. This is the one that means you less like to get shouted at down the phone, whatever the answer might be. Okay, but you've got to be clear from your Greenbelt data why this solution is the best solution to go after. Then people are ready to to ask themselves the question, will I be able to succeed in the new world? Let's say I've been working as a senior manager for 12 years in my current role, and I've always run my business this way. Hang on a second, all the rules are changing around me now. I've never seen the process run this way before. What's going to happen to me? It's a scary time. It's like being back in a new job, but without the safety net of everybody knowing that you're new. This is fundamentally scary for people. It's not just about training people up, it's also about giving them the space and the time to adjust and adapt to the new ways of working. After people have said yes to those three questions, then they've got to answer a question that's entirely personal. It's nothing to do with you. However good a green belt you are, however good a black belt you are, it's nothing to do with you. They need to make the personal choice. Do they want to live or work in this new way of working? If the answer is no, then the company should respect that and help them find somewhere else to be. Yeah, within or without the business, that's absolutely fine. Just make it amicable and make it an accepted change. Because the person knows that it's a better way and they know that it needs to happen. They just don't want it for themselves, and that's fine. The final one is a fascinating one because it changes focus yet again, and that is, will I be allowed to change? And that's where the system itself, after funding and supporting this project to get everything to happen, then turns around and goes, yeah, but actually we like running things the way we used to. Maybe some of you got experience of that. And this is where your sponsor is fundamentally responsible for making sure this does not happen. So they need to make sure that all of the people who hold the status quo at the senior level are also going through this journey so that the changes are allowed to embed and stay. Yeah, because the levels and all of the way the new process works is going to be fundamentally different and may require them to manage and lead in different ways as well. So we need to answer each of those questions in this order. So if there isn't a yes, I accept each one of those things, then I will fundamentally, I will be unlikely to be able to change. This is not resistance to change. This is just about people having the knowledge and the support and the acceptance of it. If there is resistance to change, it's point 4. But as I say, if we're ready for it, then we can support it. So wrapping up today. So hopefully you found this useful. I've just got 5 key points to finish on. Use your eyes. If you can't see it, it's really difficult to improve. Use your Cybot right from the beginning. What's the team I need, right through to the final presentation. That's the problem we set out to solve, and this is what we've achieved. Show the evidence in time for improvement in time series form, so there can be no doubt. Make sure you're always going after the most meaningful opportunity, as evidenced by the data, not by the pet project idea. And make sure it's easy for everybody to change by answering their questions in the right order and checking that they've accepted that one step at a time throughout the project. So there we go. I'll bring that to a close for today. Hopefully you found that useful. We've got a few minutes, I'm sure, if anybody's got any questions. Suze, I'm happy to answer a few questions if you want.
Yeah,
But,
so yeah,
otherwise there it is.
Okay, thanks, Sean. And if anyone does have any questions, please do put them in the chat or in the Q&A. I have put some links in the chat. So if you haven't looked at the chat for a while, I've put in some links to infographics that we've got on cause and effect diagrams, infographics on control charts. So we've got some videos. I've put all the links in there. So if you aren't familiar with our Knowledge Hub, you can find that on our website. And those are just some links that I just thought might be helpful based on some of the tools that Sean's been talking about today. Thank you very much, Sean. So I can't see any outstanding questions. So just a couple of reminders from me. We have launched our online Yellow Belt. It's an upgraded version. We've been getting some fantastic feedback about it. So if either you or any members of your team, you think it would be helpful for them to understand more about continuous improvement, then please do get in touch with us and we'd be happy to chat about it. We're still offering our complimentary Apple iPad as well. That's to equip our people who enroll on our Green Belt, our Black Belt, or our Master Black Belt public training courses. It's really aimed at giving you some, we give you course materials, but we also give you the iPad because that's really important for you to have additional equipment to use during your training with us. So please, if you are interested in attending a Green Belt, Black Belt or Master Black Belt, again, just get in touch with us. Finally, do look out for that Voice of the Customer survey. You're going to receive that from us shortly. We're really, really keen to hear what you have to say. We do read all of your feedback. In fact, that's one of my first things I do on a Monday morning. So, it's about what can we improve, but also suggestions for future topics. As I said at the beginning, we have now published our April schedule. Thank you, Sean, for sharing that on the screen. There's some great topics coming up. Sean talked at the beginning a bit about the right measures. So that's coming up at the beginning of April. We do have a small break over Easter. And I think that's it from all of us. So that is the end of today's webinar. So on behalf of PMI, myself and Sean, thank you very much for joining us. I hope you've really got a lot out of it today. Please do get in touch with us if there's anything else that you'd like to check or any questions that you have. And I wish you all a very safe and a very relaxing weekend. Thank you.